In this video, I'll be philosophizing on positive, meaningful emotions, and I want to discuss existing priors in relation to specific perception, action, and or behavior, self-conducted conducts in association with the intrinsic meaningfulness of earned perception, action, and or behavior in association with specific positive, meaningful emotions. One who superficially attempts to access positive, meaningful emotions cannot develop meaningful emotions unless one engages in the correct perception, correct action, and or correct behavior. As there is, be it one know it or not, unbeknownst to the self, meaningful criteria, and also meaningful criteria the self can create, and that itself is a pathway to meaningfulness, as one has to engage this effortful voluntary suffering and the responsabilidade that engage specific percepção, e comportamento, that those are calibrations in and of themselves of the dynamical structuring mind. Self connects mind and body connections that cultivate positive, meaningful emotions in association with the intrinsic motivations. The why am I doing this, and the what behind those that are well defined and not vague, and allowance for easier access to knowledge of meaning in affect, that we can have access to relevant, well-defined, meaningful, functional, objective, and meaningful explanations in association with the definitions of specific terms to the terminological origins within the instantiations that become substantiated within our nervous systems as we're better engaging a dynamical, creative, and or innovative and or inventive, dependent on the specific perception, action, and or behavior configurative sequencing that can allowance for different manners of approach to be able to cultivate positive, meaningful emotions, and that have meaningfully different transformations within mind-brain connections as we're absorbing meaningful information from specific pathways, and also engaging in the prior existing inputs of sensors that are translating meaningful information differently within the preceptors, and direct and indirect preceptors or precepts of self that are self-conducting the translations and responses of specific perception, action, and behavior in association with reciprocal, dynamical, relational processes between self surrounds, near and far, the external encompassing surrounding world environment. As we're engaging in the capacity to develop meaningfulness with specific tasks, that could be cooking a meal and going out to go find different ingredients at different grocery stores, and to do that from drawing on our own past experiences. Maybe you have a notebook that you've taken notes of your own, and you have your own preferences, and you've journaled, and so you're basing your ideas off your preferences. Or maybe you've read a book. Those are completely different tasks in association with the subsequent then going out to different grocery stores to be able to select ingredients that's going to have a different meaningful effect. One's drawing from your own depth of experience, and another one's engaging more of a creative, dynamical process, of which is not so much drawing from your own experience, but drawing from a conversation between the self and the text that one is engaging in. These are different approaches to doing then the subsequent same task. You can think of also the designing of a room in a similar fashion. Maybe you're going to redo your room, and what you do is your approach to this during one time is to go sample other rooms. So you go online, you search up a bunch of different pictures, or maybe what you do is you're already planning on moving, so you set up a bunch of forthcoming sessions to go look at different rooms, and doing that you're hoping to also be able to get ideas to redo your own room, to be able to develop better ideas of interior design, because maybe that's what you're interested in and you like to switch things up, and you don't like to sit in the same room with a bunch of different stagnating visual images and textures that surround you in the texturing of your dynamical structuring mind, that the different lights and shadows and contrast just sort of bring you down sometimes, but bring you up when there's that perfect combination as you engage your subjectivity and experience that positive, meaningful emotion in association with that. In contrast to going seeing a different room or cataloging, you might also just brainstorm a bunch of different ideas of what you could do, and then start to just move one or two items and see where that gets you. And all of these will have different meaningful effects on your nervous system. So the more you engage in different perception, action, and behavior configurations, the better you're able to cultivate the centralities of meaning in association with the centralities of intrinsic motivation that you develop the convergences of, that are most effective at meaningfully increasing probabilistic experiences of the frequency, magnitude, and duration of positive, meaningful emotions that are substantiated within the nervous system in association with the orbital prefrontal cortex as you're engaging that future-oriented thinking. The limbic systems, which is going to be more on the side of the brain, and also the centralities of the brain, the inner regions associated with the hippocampus, which is important for learning and memory, and also the amygdala, which is important for the regulation and also activation of positive and negative emotion, in association with the medial prefrontal cortex, which is meaningful for intrinsic motivation and those centralities of meaning. The self tends to be more localized in the medial prefrontal cortex and orbital prefrontal cortex, the newest emergent part of the brain in all individuals that have a self, in association also with other regions like the caudate nucleus and various areas of the insula that are important more for the meaningful emotion development, and also being able to monitor our current emotional states at different moment-to-moment experiential encounters, and to engage in introspective processes, often of more reflection, and to be able to think more deeply. But those are always associated with pathways from the medial prefrontal cortex to the orbital prefrontal cortex, though most of our dopaminergic structures and learning processes associated with acetylcholine are concentrated within the medial prefrontal cortex, which is important for absorption and interest, which allowances for the development of intrinsic motivation and the cultivation of centralities of meaningfulness in association with the development of the centralities of meaning, as we're engaging not just the meaning processes, but the development, maintenance, and sustainability of meaningfulness from the cultivations of meaningfulness within different moments of our experiential encounters that develop from, as it must be good enough and necessarily necessary conditions, perception, action, and behavior create meaning in association with specific neuronal pathways that have these perception-dependent learning plasticities that the dynamical structuring mind allowances for meaning to transport inside mind-body connections and to engage in more of a substantiated process that consolidates the nervous system and allows for the intermission activation of specific neuronal pathways in association with the calibrations of perception, action, and or behavior in association with what tends to elicit positive, meaningful emotion more effectively, efficiently, relevant to the specific perception, action, and behavior. It's not just random, and it's often reciprocal, dynamical, relational to specific external properties, operating more in these reciprocal relations in which we're connecting B and D and often some X component, part, and process within these combinations and configurations of meaning that are well defined, and they're not arbitrary or vague or irrelevant or meaningless or pointless absurdities existing within the dynamical mind and body, as to mean that they are always bound to specific perception, action, and behavior that's different than another combinatory set of meaningful information association with perception, action, and behavior sequencing. So the perception, action, and or behavior that you engage in handwriting is different than the perception, action, and or behavior you engage in typing, even though they're both engaging in a written and recorded process. And they have different meaningful effects and capacities to engage, easier access to knowledge, efficiency, different than each other. So as we are engaging in different yet domain-specific perception, action, and or behavior within different intermittencies, we allowance for the development of intrinsic creativeness, inventiveness, and innovativeness in association with the domain-specific perception, action, and or behavior that allows for masterfulness to develop from the perception, action, and or behavior in which we have centralizing meanings. Convergences are most likely to probabilistically develop, and we can better calibrate our knowledge regarding domain-specific meaningful information with the cultivation of self-wisdom, our strengths and capacity to strengthen those strengths, and the positive experiences that we have that are more likely to probabilistically invoke specific positive, meaningful emotions in association with specific, well-defined perception, action, and or behavior. That's all I want to say for this video. I hope you have an awesome one developing those efforts.